Amen. Amen. Y'all can go ahead and take your seats. So good to see all of you here on this Memorial Day weekend. Hope you guys are having a great week, great start to your summer. If we haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Ryan. I have the privilege of serving as one of the pastors on staff here. And if this is your first time, you couldn't have picked a better week because we are actually jumping in, no pun intended, to a brand new sermon series that we are calling All In. Now, I'm going to get to that series in just a second, but want to catch you up on where we've been, really, because this, I think, is sort of part two to the sermon series that we just finished. So the sermon series that we're coming out of was called More Than a Label. And if you were with us throughout that series, you know we really worked in that series to peel off some of the labels that the world tends to place on Jesus, and to peel off some of the labels that the world tends to put on us as Christians. And if you were here last week for Pastor Daniel's message, you heard a message on the labels that we sometimes put on ourselves. Crazy, impactful series. And I hope that series really did something in each of you. Above all, I hoped it helped you to see Jesus more clearly. Because something happens when you actually see Jesus for who he really is, not who society says he is or who the media says he is, for who he really is. When you see Jesus for who he really is, it removes the excuses. Right? It removes the excuses to where you can't just keep living your life the same way and pretend like you don't know any better. That's ultimately where this new series is picking up. Like I said, we're calling this series All In. And for the next several weeks, we are going to be in the book of Romans. The book of Romans, which many consider to be one of the greatest theological masterpieces ever written. But really where Paul is ultimately going to destroy every excuse that we have for living the sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of keep it to yourself type of faith. So if more than the label really helped us to see who Jesus is, then this series, All In, is going to help us understand what we are to do about it. But before we get to the words in Romans, I want to actually start with a question. Okay, when was the last time that you were completely, I'm talking not caring who's watching, all in on something? I want you to think if there was a moment or a season in time where you were completely all in on something. I'll tell you, and it happens for me. It happens once a year, every single year, at Round Rock's daddy-daughter dance. That's right. This daddy-daughter dance, Avery and I have been going to every year since she was a little toddler. If I look at those pictures, I will cry. So I'm just going to keep eye contact right here. We've been going every single year, and it's the highlight of our year. Not just me, but her. I mean, she starts talking about next year's dance before this year's dance is even over. Right? What she's going to wear, what songs are going to play, all those things. She absolutely loves it, and so do I. And every year during this dance, they have this competition where they send out these judges and they pick some finalists to compete in this kind of dance floor clearing, all-in kind of throwdown competition. Okay? It's Avery's biggest dream, like her bucket list, if you asked her, would be to be picked as and to win this competition. And so what happens is every year the DJ gets on the mic and he announces, hey, it's time. We're going to send out some judges. So, get ready. And you know what I do? I break out every single dance move that I could possibly think of. I'm talking dance moves I have no business attempting, dance moves that put my back and my knees, all that at risk. Like, I don't care what it is. I am willing to go all in for this girl. I don't care who's watching. I don't care how I look at all, because for my little girl, I am willing to make a complete fool of myself. No hesitation, no questions asked. And I'd love to tell you that we won it all this past year, but the truth is we're still waiting, okay? I think there's some politics going on. Like, there's probably some money changing hands. I don't know. I'm not making accusations, but I am aware of what's going on, okay? But either way, regardless of politics or not, next year we're going to give it our best shot. So now that you've got that image of me dancing seared into your brains, let me ask you. What is it that makes a grown man with zero dancing ability and full awareness of that fact not just show up to this dance, but actually compete? What is it? It's not confidence. It's certainly not skill. We've already covered that. No, it's one thing. It's that she's worth it. She's worth it, and that changes everything about the way that I even walk into that room. I'm not there to perform for a crowd or to impress anybody. I'm just responding to my little girl. Responding with love. So there's no calculation. I don't think about anything. And you could probably tell by the way that I'm dancing, I literally take all of that and just throw it out the window because I made that decision a long time ago. That I was willing to make a fool for myself for this little girl. I made that decision the moment I became her dad. The moment I became her dad, that question was answered. She is worth whatever it cost me. And if that's true of the way that I love my daughter, that for her I'm willing to look foolish. That for her I'm willing to sacrifice my comfort or my pride. Then what does that say about the way that we follow Jesus? It's exactly the question Paul is going to point us to this morning. It's not just do you believe in Jesus, but is he worth it to you? Is he worth the awkward conversation? Is he worth the sacrifice? Is he worth rearranging your life for? Is he worth going all in? Because here's what I know about Jesus. He already made that decision when it comes to you. While you were still a sinner, he says, Christ died for you. Jesus made that decision. That's why he walked this earth. That's why he went to the cross. It was for you. Each and every one of you, he decided, hey, no, you are worth it. You are worth it to him to go all in for. The question this morning is whether or not he's worth it to you. So Romans 1 is going to address this morning. That's where we're headed. So if you brought your Bibles with you, your Bible apps, I want to ask you to join me in Romans chapter 1. As you do, let me just give you a little bit of context here. It's going to help you out over the course of the next several weeks. This book called Romans is actually a letter that the Apostle Paul wrote to the Christian believers in Rome. And if you know anything about Rome at that time, it was the most powerful city in the world. Really the centerpiece of a government that spanned across just a vast space. And Rome at that time carried all that power. They're incredibly hostile to anything that wasn't about Rome. Certainly not the gospel, certainly not to a people that were claiming another king other than Caesar. And even still, Paul was eager to get to Rome. He had never been there, but he was so convinced of what he was carrying, this message of the gospel, that he couldn't wait to go and to preach to these people that he had never met. And so he sends this letter ahead of his arrival, really to prepare the believers there, but also to ground them in the truth of the gospel and to remind them of what they were carrying. Speaking of what they were carrying, that's where we're going to pick things up. Verses 16 and 17. Paul says this, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith." So Paul makes it clear right out the jump. He says there's one reason I have for being all in. And that reason is the gospel. This thing that you and I may sort of casually refer to, he says, is the power of God for salvation. Now that is a bold claim in any context. But again, if you think of that first century context that Paul is speaking to, in that Roman word, the word gospel, it was actually used to announce these military victories, to point to the salvation that was brought about by Caesar. And here, Paul, he borrows that term and he uses that same word to speak to the power of God and to a greater salvation. And I get that nowadays, like we're not going to get confused about which gospel Paul's referring to, right? We're not going to be like, hey, is this Caesar's gospel or is this Christ's gospel? But I think we do tend to overlook the power within it. This power that Paul points us to, this is an important piece here. So I want you to pay attention. There's a Greek word here that Paul uses. It's the Greek word dunamis. It's where we get our English word dynamite from. And I think what Paul is pointing out, and what's especially relevant for us today, is that the gospel is not just some sort of framework by which we're to live our life by. It's not some just advice for how to live a better life from some first century rabbi. He's saying that the gospel is an explosive force. An explosive force with the specific purpose of salvation, but not the kind of salvation that a military victory brings. The salvation that Paul is talking about is a greater rescue. And the rescue he's talking about is the fact that every single person in this room had the same problem. That no amount of self-effort, no amount of self-improvement could ever solve. It was the problem of our separation from God by our sin. It's the problem that every single one of us faced. And that gap, there was only one way for that gap to be closed. It was by Jesus paying our debt, paying that sacrifice that we owed. He took on our sin. He paid that debt and he closed that gap so that we could be made right with God. He bridged that gap for us by going to the cross after living the perfect life we could never live. And he died that death that we deserve to die. 3 days later, conquering death, defeating the grave. That, friends, is the gospel. That's the gospel. And I know that for some of you, that's not new information. You've known the truth of the gospel for years, and yet for all that the gospel is and for all that the gospel does, I think so many of us, we tend to treat it like a crutch. Have you ever been hurt before, but we've all got those pair of crutches out in the garage. They're there when we need them, but man, if we don't need them, they're just sitting there collecting dust. I want you to write down this truth. The gospel is not a crutch, it's a cure. The gospel is not a crutch, it's a cure. What do I mean by that? Well, a crutch helps you manage your pain. A cure eliminates the problem altogether. A crutch keeps you functional, keeps you on your feet, but a cure makes you whole. A crutch, if you think about it, is really only useful to the person who's leaning on it. But the purpose of a cure is to be given away. Like I said, the gospel is not a crutch, it's a cure. And I think the truth that some of you need to hear today is that you can't give away what you were only using to get by. We said again, you can't give away what you were only using to get by. The gospel is not a crutch, it's a cure. So with that in mind, let me ask you, when was the last time you actually offered the gospel to somebody who needed it? I'm talking actually offered it, not just said, hey, I'm going to pray for them when I get home. But actually open your mouth. Actually shared about who Jesus is, shared about what he's done in your life. I think the truth is that for most of us, we either can't remember or we never have. We either can't remember or we never have. And I don't know if the reason is fear. I don't know if the reason is just wanting to stay comfortable, or even that you just can't clearly or confidently articulate it. I don't know what that reason is for you, and I'm not trying to discount those reasons. But one thing I notice about those reasons is that they're all about you. They're not about the other person. And if those excuses are all about you, and if all you're worried about is you, then the gospel is just going to continue to be your crutch. Again, I say this from a personal place because fear and comfort and lack of confidence, I know those excuses all too well. I lived every single one of them for years. See, back before I was in ministry, there was a guy that I used to work with named Eric. Great guy. Everybody loved Eric, but I knew that Eric didn't know Jesus. And so I'd pray for Eric all the time. And I'd hear messages like this. And the pastor would say, hey, who's that person God's put on your heart? And it was always Eric. Every single time his face and his name would show up in my head. But guess what? I never said a word to him. Never shared the gospel with him, not once. I prayed for him in private, but I'd walk past his desk every single day and would think like, no, now's not the right time. Or I'd walk by his office and think, well, he's kind of my boss. This might get a little weird. I'd think, okay, maybe next time, maybe tomorrow is going to be a good opportunity for me. But all I was doing was using the gospel as a crutch. It was something that I was leaning on personally, but something I never once offered to the person that was sitting 10 feet away from me who desperately needed it. It was my crutch. Well, years passed, and Eric made some choices that took him down a road that I wouldn't wish on anyone. And I'm not standing here telling you that those things are on me. His choices are his choices. What I am telling you is that I had something that could have changed the trajectory of his life, and I kept it in my pocket because I was more concerned with my comfort than with his eternity. And here's what I understand now that I wish I would have understood then. I have the cure. I have it. And so do you. Even if you're hearing the gospel for the first time today, this is the cure for the actual problem that every single person that you know is living with. I guarantee it. So think for a second about what that means. That means that when you walk out of here today, when you go spend time with family or friends this weekend, when you get back to work on Tuesday, you're carrying the only thing that can fix what is actually broken in the people around you. You have the cure. Right? And just like a doctor who knows what he's carrying is going to change everything for the person sitting across from him, all you have to do is share it. Think about it. If a doctor has the cure, his bedside manner really doesn't matter all that much. If a doctor has the cure, it really doesn't matter if he has all of the right answers. He just needs to believe the cure works and to put it in front of the person who actually needs it. That's the whole job. Now, if that same doctor has the cure and stays quiet, because he doesn't want to be pushy, doesn't want to ruin the friendship, doesn't want to be awkward, well, that doctor is doing more than just missing an opportunity. That doctor would be being negligent. And so too are you. So too am I if we choose to stay quiet. Friends, the people in your life who don't know Jesus, they're not just having a hard time. They're living without the only thing that can fix what is actually broken inside of them, and you have it. You have it. The gospel is the guaranteed accomplishing power of God for salvation that is available to everyone who believes. It's not a crutch that you use to get by. It's the cure that you are to carry out into the world. Do you believe that, church? Because this isn't just something that we carry personally. This is something that we carry collectively. So let me just tell you what all in looks like for us here at Awaken. It means that we show up on Sundays ready to bring people into something real. Right? It means that we invest in planting churches in cities that need them and in sending missionaries to share the gospel in places that it's never been. And it means that we don't just build a great church for the people who are already in it. No, we build one that's always making room for the people who aren't here yet. That's what all in looks like at Awaken. That's what all in looks like. But here's what I found, friends, is that you can't carry something outward. You can't share something that you haven't fully received for yourself. That's why I love what Paul does here in verse 17. We're going to look at it again because he's saying, hey, this is a gift that you have to receive first for yourself. Listen to these words. Verse 17. He says, for in it, meaning the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. The righteous shall live by faith. Now, righteous, that just means to be right with God. I know that's a kind of a big churchy word. It just means that you are accepted, you are declared clean. And Paul says the way that you get there is the same way you stay there. It's by faith. It's not by performance. It's not by striving. It's not by just sort of like trying to white knuckle your way through this thing. It's by faith. And I think the reason why Paul calls that out is because he knows exactly how we are wired. He knows that we are wired towards performance, that we are wired towards earning, towards striving, towards transaction. We've always been wired this way, but especially in today's day and age. That's why he makes it clear that the righteousness of God is revealed in the gospel. Let me just pause there to state something obvious. He doesn't say that the righteousness of Ethan is revealed in the gospel. That the righteousness of Jocelyn is revealed in the gospel. No, he says the righteousness of God is revealed in the gospel. He wants you to know that your right standing before God doesn't come from you. It comes from outside of you. So it's not a grade that you earn. It's a verdict that has been handed down. That verdict of not guilty. Not a verdict that you earned yourself. Not a verdict based off of your righteousness, but off of the righteousness of Christ. And here's what's even more significant. Paul says that this righteousness is received from faith for faith. Those 4 words have just been rocking me this week. From faith for faith. I think a lot of us, we have this idea of faith in our mind that is really like the starting line to the Christian life. That we have faith and then the rest of the stuff we do is just our works. Like that we have faith as sort of like the down payment when you first buy a home, but that our works are like the monthly mortgage that we better make or else we're going to get our house foreclosed on. But that's not grace. That's a payment plan. That's a loan. Let me just say the obvious to you. God's grace was not loaned to you. It was given to you as a free gift. From faith for faith. Those 4 words, they describe the trajectory of the entire Christian life. Right? You begin in faith, absolutely, but you continue in faith and you grow deeper in faith. There is no point on your journey where you graduate from faith into something else. It's always faith, start to finish. Why is this important? Again, because we try to work our way to God. We try to earn our salvation. Even those of us who know better, even those of us who've been following Jesus a long time, we fall into these habits. Which is why I want to give you the second encouragement this morning. An encouragement is to stop paying for what's already yours. Stop paying for what's already yours. Friends, I see so many people do this. And maybe part of it's because I'm a pastor and we have these spiritual conversations, but I want you to kind of paint a picture for you this morning to help you see kind of how crazy this is, this pattern that we get ourselves into. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, that somebody were to give you $1 billion in cash. Billion with a B, just showed up on your doorstep. And you knew who it was. My guess is you would be pretty darn thankful. My guess is you would be like writing thank you notes, maybe posting about them on social media or doing whatever you could just to try to express your gratitude. And my guess is you'd probably mean it. But then imagine after a little while, you started like quietly leaving $5 bills on their porch at their house. Every single day, every single week for the rest of your life. If that's you, let me ask you, did you actually accept the gift? Or did you take something that was freely given to you and slowly turn it back into a transaction? See, here's the thing about the $5 bills. It's not that you're not grateful when you leave them there. But the reality is you're leaving there because somewhere deep down, you don't believe that the gift was ultimately real. Or you believe on some level like you have to earn it. So you sort of hedge and you perform, you try to make that make sense because a gift that big with no strings attached just doesn't compute for our hearts that are wired towards earning. The truth is, friends, I think a lot of Christians, we spend our entire lives making $5 payments on something that was already paid for. A lot of us, we do that by striving, trying to make up for this thing that was already and completely covered. And the tragedy of it isn't the exhaustion of it, although it is exhausting. The tragedy is that nobody asks for it. This is just evidence that somewhere along the way you stop believing that the gift was real. And what breaks my heart when I see this, what absolutely breaks my heart when people see the Christian life as this need to repay this gift, this never-ending need, is that they're missing the most important part. They're placing $5 bills on the porch when the front door is wide open and God's saying, no, I want you to come inside. I don't need your $5. God's saying, I don't need your works. I want you to come inside. I want you to have a relationship with me. So friends, stop trying to repay God for what he's freely given to you. I'm not saying don't stop doing good things. I'm not saying to stop serving or stop giving or any of that. I'm saying stop doing that to try to earn what you already have. The gift was real, so you can come inside. And here's what happens to a person who actually does that, who actually fully receives this gift and stops trying to earn it. What happens is they don't coast. They move. They move. Because what happens when somebody receives that kind of grace fully is it doesn't produce passivity. No, it produces people who are completely nothing held back, all in. The Apostle Paul is a prime example of that for us. Here's a man whose life was completely dismantled and rebuilt by that same grace. And what we see in him is this eagerness. This eagerness. And what he is even going to say is an obligation to share the gospel. Listen to these words that come just before our passage earlier. Verses 14 and 15. Paul says, I am under obligation, both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and to the foolish. So I'm eager to preach the gospel to you also who are in Rome. You'll notice on that slide, I underlined the word obligation. And I did that on purpose because I think a lot of us, we hear that word obligation and we think of a burden. We think of guilt. We think of just another thing that we're sort of behind on and need to make up for. But I want you to stay with me here because if you hear it that way, then you're going to miss everything. See, the Greek word that Paul uses here is the word ophiletes. It means debtor. But it's not the kind of debt that you might be thinking of. See, because I think there really ultimately are two kinds of debt. There's the kind of debt that crushes you. Like maybe the mortgage payment that you can't afford to pay. Or maybe like the mistake that seems to follow you everywhere. Certain debt like that, it makes you want to hide. It makes you want to disappear. But there's another kind of debt. It's the kind of debt that you feel towards something who does something just so unbelievably generous for you. The kind of debt you feel towards somebody that just, does something that changes the trajectory of your life. That kind of debt, it doesn't produce dread, it produces devotion. It doesn't make you want to hide, it actually makes you want to move. Paul is saying he's living under that kind of debt. Not the crushing debt, but the defining debt. And friends, so too are you. So my final encouragement for you this morning is to let your debt define you. Let your debt define you. See, for Paul, his debt to Jesus is what it compelled him to continue even after being beaten and shipwrecked and imprisoned, even after being persecuted. It was that debt that compelled him, because Jesus had pulled him out of the darkness and had handed him the most powerful thing in the universe. That's why we see his response as not this like reluctance of like, okay, Lord, I guess if you're asking me to go to Rome, I'll go. No, he's eager to go to the city that he's never been to preach to these people he's never preached to, and to put his life on the line in order to do so. Why? Because he knows what he's carrying. He knows what he's carrying. And he feels the weight of that, not as a burden, but as the greatest privilege of his life. Paul is not obligated out of some duty. He's obligated out of devotion. Those aren't the same thing. Not even close. So before I close, I want to make this real to you. Each and every one of you, I want you to go back to the time when you met Jesus. Maybe that time is today. Go back to that time that you first met Jesus. Whoever it was that first told you. Whoever it was that first maybe showed you by the way that they acted. Whoever it was that loved you enough to have that conversation that changed everything. Because the reality is, for almost all of us, somebody did that for you. Somebody decided that you were worth the awkward moment. Somebody decided that you were worth looking foolish for. Somebody decided that you were worth the risk. And they stopped being passive. They opened their mouth. They told you who Jesus was. They told you what Jesus had done for them. And guess what, friends? Now it's your turn. It's your turn. Not because you have to, because you get to. You get to be a part of sharing what somebody shared with you. And the reality is, there is a story that only you can tell. There is a person that you have, for some reason, some sort of special access to. Somebody that is waiting. They may not know it yet, but they are waiting for the cure. And you have it. That's not a burden, friends. That is a privilege. To let your debt define you. And to let it drive you. To change the life of someone else. And here's the thing. I realize that some of you are going to hear this today. And you're not going to do anything with it. Not because you don't believe it. Not because you don't trust me. Just because that's our default. To say, hey, Pastor Ryan, that was a great message. And to go on unchanged. Don't let that be your default. Make the decision. Here and now. Let that decision impact the way that you walk into that room. The way that you engage in that conversation. In the same way every year that I walk into that daddy-daughter dance, I've already made my decision. I'm willing to do what it takes. Are you willing to do what it takes so that that person that God has already put on your mind, already put on your heart, comes to know who Jesus is?